Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance Sexton, thank you for joining us. Long sleeve shirt day, Lance. What's going on? Is it fall over in Arkansas?
It is fall, Bob. This morning when I walked out, it was 39 degrees. So long sleeve shirts are the order of the day.
Katie,
My golf shirts are being retired, Bob, for a while.
Well, Southern California is going to hit 93 today, so eat your heart out if you like warm weather. We have a lot to go over. Interesting news came over. But Lance, what are we doing tomorrow for the industry?
Well, basically, we're going to talk about PPP forgiveness, and we're going to talk about the new 3508S, Bob, but we're also going to include discussion of the 3508EZ. And the form that's been around seems like for years, Bob, but it's only been a few months of 3508. So we're going to cover all three forms in tomorrow's presentation. Talk a little bit about the forgiveness platform and what lenders are required to do, and just help bring up your skill set on PPP forgiveness.
Lance, they call it a vendor meeting today, and we just got this in that said they have a two-tiered processing. They have the regular processing, then they have the PPP forgiveness. They call it tracks, and they're targeting to have this all done by October 20th. So they're still adjusting the dashboard. So we know they're working hard on it.
Oh, absolutely. And, guys, excuse me, patience will be the order for the day on PPP forgiveness once it's submitted to SBA. There's somebody that's going to touch each one of those files like you, the participant bank, is touching and looking at each one of those files. So it's going to take a while to process all these forgiveness applications.
SBA came up with an 11-page report, FAQs. It is in your dashboard. Feel free to download that, Lance. There's a lot of technical good questions in there. I know you're going to pick out the highlights for tomorrow. Katie, I know you're putting together a guide for forgiveness. You'll have it ready by tomorrow? No pressure. No pressure.
No, it's basically done right now. I'm just going through and cleaning it up, making sure it's all organized. But really, I go through that guide, and there's some great information where I'm going through each of those IFRs that had anything to do with forgiveness. I've listed those out, gave real simple bullet points on the main points that have to do with forgiveness. And there's some great little infographics as well. I think it'll be a great guide.
I haven't seen that. Very nice cover. Very nice. Good for you. Okay. Let's go to the poll questions. Number one, we're always curious about this. We like to ask sort of off-the-wall questions, but this is important for Main Street. Are your borrowers selling products through Amazon's platform? And we probably should have asked the better question, what percentage of your borrowers are? Lance, what percentage of your borrowers would you say are selling?
I'd say it might be 25% of my borrowers, Bob, but it certainly is a huge platform. I know the UPS guy is a very familiar guy at my front porch.
Sure.
So it's a lot of small businesses are taking advantage of platforms like Amazon. A lot of small businesses are selling online now. They're posting products on Instagram and shipping out to customers, and they're finding new ways to transact business. And when you're looking at a new SBA loan application, that's something, Bob, we should be looking at. What is their marketing plan in relationship to COVID-19?
One of my favorite restaurants is down in San Juan Capistrano, and owner's a nice guy, and I hadn't been there for a while. I talked to him, and he said what saved his business is he has an outdoor patio, so he's in Orange County, so he was able to serve there. But he didn't. I asked him, well, what are you doing? Other revenue streams? Are you using Grubhub or delivery services? He says, no. But he was trying to do takeout, and he said he wasn't able to do that, which tells me unless you have a very, very strong following the consumer is just going to go to the Grubhubs, the Uber Eats, etc.
Sure. Well, and one of my younger daughters that's in college, works the carry-out function in a major restaurant, and she has important status in that restaurant. Their carry-out function represents 75% of their business now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a broader question. We want to know, what other revenue streams are your borrowers developing? And that's an important question, important dialogue to have. Where does the majority of PPP loan fraud originate? Katie, I think this is your question.
Yeah, well, if anybody read my article today, they'll probably have the answer already.
There you go, 80%.
People are reading. So yeah, just before we get to the slide and everything on it, just to kind of give a tease, a Bloomberg analysis found that 75% of the fraud was approved in fintech companies.
Go back to those results. I see a big fat 0 for SBA lenders. That's very impressive, Lance, for our industry.
Well, I think that what happened is those borrowers who were prone to commit fraud were looking for the easiest path to getting a PPP loan. And SBA lenders picked up the applications and looked at them. You know, when I looked at an application, Bob, I'd go online and look at the Secretary of State and make sure they were in good standing. And, if I felt on
payroll forms, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So not surprised by the results, and Katie's article was right on point.
PPP lenders must resubmit forgiveness applications using the new form. This assumes that the form's already been sent to SBA. Do we have to redo it? Lance?
You don't have to.
Very good. Very good.
There are different tiers, and we'll talk about that tomorrow, the types of PPP borrowers and which form they should use. But a under 50K could use the 3508EZ. They could use the 3508S. And, if they were inclined to, Bob, they could use 3508.
Katie, we've been concerned about the form that expires October 31st. What's happening?
So SBA came out with just one little addition to the FAQ sheet that came out a little while ago. That addition, it says that the forms, which all say they expire at the end of the month, will be extended eventually. They haven't given us the date where the next expiration date will be, but they say this is a temporary expiration date. And as soon as they get it extended and approved, the new expiration date will be posted, I assume, on their site along with the new forms.
Very good.
Bob?
Go ahead, Lance.
I am hopeful that short expiration date means it might possibly include a little bit larger PPP loans. Don't know that it will, but hopeful.
Yeah, we hope. Katie, anything new going on in Washington on PPP?
Nothing new this week, unfortunately. I think we're still kind of waiting, as there's a lot going on in Congress right now, especially with trying to, confirm a judge and things like that. So I think their focus is on that. There is still talk, in the background between the administration and especially the House trying to come up with some kind of comprehensive bill of some sort that would handle all kinds of stimulus. That is the preferred option right now over sending in maybe smaller bills that's just focused on small business and PPP. But we'll see where it goes. There's no real movement yet.
Wanted to give you a sense of context for stats. Last calendar year, ending September 30th, 7A did 22, rounded up to 23 billion, 504, almost $6 billion for a total of 50,000 total loans. And as I've said, Lance and I think Lance is with me on this, and I think Katie is also, with the PPP loans. I think you're going to see a lot of that spill over into SBA lending in the future.
Right. Well,
Well,
you're
I
seeing
think PPP.
people. Oh, go ahead, Lance.
Oh, I was just going to say PPP gave small business lenders an opportunity to develop relationships with customers who may have had a deposit account but not a loan relationship with that institution. So I think it is going to open up new opportunities in the future.
Lance, I'm going to talk a little bit about Amazon, and I'm conflicted. You know, I'm a big Main Street guy. I like driving up and down rural America Main Streets. I dislike intensely seeing boarded up Main Streets. But for small business, they're saying what? What's the number here? What percentage of their sales? Over half the products sold on Amazon come from small and medium-sized businesses. What are your thoughts about that, Lance?
I think it's true. Even in my world, Bob, I'm in Wally world, and Walmart is an enormous business. But many of the products that Walmart sells do, in fact, come from small businesses. Amazon's the same way. So large companies are not evil. Quite often they support small businesses extremely well. But I'm the same way you are, Bob. I try to encourage people, go buy from their local small business owner. I mean, who supports the youth athletics, the schools? That's your small business owners. You don't see
the high school baseball team with the sign up on the outfield. Yes, absolutely.
You don't see Amazon sponsoring Clarksville High School athletics or any other athletics for that matter.
This is an interesting stat, the last one. 37 small businesses surpassed $1 million in sales for the first time selling on Amazon. What you should be aware of also is Amazon's offering financing for those people. So that is another competitor which you should be aware of.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Very good. Let's see. Go ahead, Katie. While we're talking about PPP scammers targeting fintechs, go ahead and wrap up your reporting on that.
Sure. So I actually thought this was sort of interesting, and at first I really was curious as to why so much of the fraud was coming from these fintechs, because obviously this is not going to be primarily on a lender's basis, because of course with PPP we were able to rely on self-certifications. So a lot of it comes down to the borrowers. So that tells me that well, let me take a step back. Fintechs represent only 19 of the 4,928 lenders that participated in the program. So they're significantly smaller group than a lot of the other types of lenders. And they only did about 15% of the loans. But of, all of the fraud, they're representing 75%. So that tells me that they were being targeted. So when I looked into it a little bit more, and Bloomberg has a great analysis, but I had to do some of my own research as well. It seems to me that most of that was caused by the way they were presenting the loans on their websites, the way you could submit these applications very quickly and easily, and it was very automated. Some of the fintechs had it so that over 75% of their loans were never seen or touched by an actual lender, an actual person. It just went through a computer program. And, there's also several of them that said that they got loans approved so quickly that they had approvals in less than 4 hours. They had borrowers calling saying, did something go wrong? Did I get the approval announcement incorrectly, or is there an error? It turns out they were just very quick at getting these through because it was automated. So I think a lot of those fraudsters really targeted those because of the automation and because of how quickly it was passed through the system. And
I'm sorry, finish. Go ahead, finish.
So the Department of Justice really said in order to have prevented this, and of course, it's a good idea even for our non-fintech lenders to really just Google search these companies, check that they're real. Half of these frauds, I'm hearing they didn't even have an actual physical location or a website or any social media presence. Those things could have all easily been detected by a Google search.
Google what? Yep. Google. Katie.
Katie Google.
What percentage of the distribution of the fintech loans compared to the overall funding? In other words, fintech, were they predominantly the same as all PPP loans, or were they weighted toward the smaller loans or the larger loans?
I saw most of them actually, they seemed like they were all over the place. I saw a lot of them end up being the smaller loans because they jumped in really more heavily in the second round. Of course, in the first round, they only started about halfway through, or a little over halfway through. So you saw a lot more of those smaller loans in that second portion. So it seems like they did significantly more of those, but they did do some of the larger ones as well.
Berkshire asked the question, how likely is the fraud, the 75% fraud number coming from the fintechs, likely to affect SBA's approval process for them to try to enter the SBA market through a nationwide license? I don't know, but I suspect, Lance, you were a former SBA executive. I suspect you're going to take a close, hard look at what went wrong and how do we fix it.
I think they have to, because Katie mentioned probably the critical element, and all of us SBA lenders who did PPP and did it the correct way, there were multiple human beings who touched and looked at, and even though it was a quick process, Bob, every PPP loan that I put into eTran, I had a checklist, and I had to go down the checklist and say, okay, this form's in there, articles of incorporation in there, good standing in there, before I could put it into eTran. Automation is great at delivering quick service, but there would have to be some concern about fintechs doing 7A loans.
I remember having a great conversation with a very successful microlender, and what that microlender told me is they specialize in these smaller loans, but they said, but I signed off on every one. Maybe it only took me a minute, but I eyeballed every one just to make sure everything seemed to be okay. And if it didn't, I shot it back. So I think the human touch doesn't have to be a lengthy analysis, but just someone asking the question, does this make sense? What are we doing here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Patricia asked the question, will most lenders duplicate calculations for the 3508S loans? I'm unclear of what lender responsibilities are regarding those calculations. Lance, we don't know yet, do we?
We haven't gotten a lot of guidance, but in many instances when talking about reviewing PPP forgiveness, for instance, on the 3508S, one of the certifications that the borrower makes is that the calculations are correct. And, I think you need to eyeball it. Make sure the math is not out in left field, that addition and subtraction is done properly, but you're not expected to fully calculate forgiveness on that. But again, what I call a good faith review is what needs to be accomplished.
And some people may be rolling their eyes on subtraction and addition, Lance, but you and I read a ton of Inspector General reports where the numbers don't add up.
Yeah, they're not asking you to spend hours on each forgiveness application, but you should take a look. It's just like when you were processing the PPP loans and getting them approved. You took a look, made sure certain items were there, made sure, one of the examples is just taking the previous year's 940 report, looking at the annual payroll, dividing it by 12 and multiplying it times 2.5 to get the correct PPP loan amount. Simple, quick, good faith review.
Let's see. Vicky asked a great question, and I saw this article also. The Philadelphia Inquirer had a headline which said there was blanket forgiveness for PPP loans under $50,000. The headline is wrong. We do not have blanket forgiveness. Correct, Lance?
It's better and simpler forgiveness, but it does require it. It makes this. what we had hoped for is a form that they had certifications they sign, and that's all they have to do.
That's all they have to do, right.
Still have to submit the supporting documentation for payroll and non-payroll expenses to the financial institution. So it's not blanket forgiveness, but it's certainly closer than 3508 easy and 3508.
Yeah, Vicki, I was conflicted whether to talk about this, so thanks for asking the question, because it's wrong, and unfortunately we're in a situation, there's still a lot of gray area. We're trying to sort all this out. Lance, what's the difference between your webinar tomorrow versus the webinar next week on servicing delinquent PPP loans?
Well, and we're still gathering information, but we want to understand what happens when a loan is not forgiven. How do you service that loan? How does the 5057-2 apply to it? So that's the, tomorrow's webinar is about PPP forgiveness, the forms, the documents. Next week's going to be about how you take care of what's left over,
which is going to be a challenge. Lance, thank you very much for your time. I like you in the long shirt. Katie, good to see you as always. Thank you. And thank you for joining us for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great day.
Have a great afternoon.